most people struggle with understanding dependency injection and IOC in Spring Boot, when in reality they are a very simple concepts that I will explain to you today. In Java standard application, we are responsible for creating and managing the object lifecycle. Of course, we don't have to deal with destroying the object because that is the task of the garbage collector. But we still have to provide this object to every class that needs this object to work. And this object might have multiple other dependencies that he needs to work. I have opened here a Spring Boot application, but let's for a moment pretend it's a vanilla Java project. And I will comment out this Spring Boot application run, and I will also create a simple example repository. So repository example, Java, okay, and I will also create example service. Okay, so our repository will have just some list of items. Okay, and a method to retrieve them. So public. And I will return an collection. Yeah. And in our service, we will have this repository. And instead of providing it this way, I will just create new repository for now. Okay, and we will have some method get items that will just call the repository. And then in the application, we will just call this service. So service, and just service get items and print them. Looks nice and simple, right? Now let's imagine that instead of having these two classes, we have 20 or 200 classes, which is realistic in large-scale applications. And we need this repository in 5 different classes. So we now have to create a new instance of a class in every instance of the service, right? That's just a waste of memory. And what if this class has other classes that it depends on, or has a state that should be shared among the same instances? That quickly can become a mess. So the first thing we can do to make it better is to introduce the dependency injection pattern. So let's do what the compiler suggested before and get here a repository, and just assign it to this repository. Okay. And now we don't have to do anything in the repository, but in the application, we have to provide a new repository here. So let's do new repository example, right? This is much better, but still not ideal. We still have to manually create new objects and pass them to the correct spots in the main method. In bigger projects, this will quickly get messy. What if there was someone who could do that for us and let us focus on the logic of the application? And here is where the inversion of control, or IOC, concept comes. In Spring, we surrender the control over the object lifecycle, so creation and management and destruction of the object, to the Spring framework. Not Spring Boot, but to the Spring framework. And we make use of it using the dependency injection that I just showed you. So to sum up, IOC is a concept of giving away the control of the object lifecycle to the framework. And the dependency injection, or DI for short, is implementation of this concept. By the way, if you are serious about learning Java and Spring Boot ecosystem, I am building a community for the aspiring Java and Spring Boot developers. I will put all of my courses there, and I will also personally help you with your Java and Spring Boot projects, which is a limited offer depending on how many people join the community. If you're interested, top link in the description. Okay, let's finally make use of the amazing Spring framework in our example application. First of all, I will just delete this because we won't be needing this, and uncomment our Spring Boot application run. I have to re-import, of course, the Spring application. Okay. Now we will make our repository into a bin. And what is a bin? Bin is basically a class that is managed by the Spring IOC. And in the Spring context, it means just that. We make our class into a bin by adding the component annotation. It's generally a good practice for repositories to, instead of using component, use the repository annotation, which is basically an alias for the component. So repository, and if we go to the definition of it, we can see that's indeed just alias for component, right? Okay. So we made our repository into a bin. Let's do the same for the service. So instead of using component or repository, we will also use another alias called service. And now both our classes are managed by the Spring Boot. If we would have multiple constructors here, we would have to add also auto-wired annotation to our constructor, so the Spring Boot knows that it has to use this constructor. But in case of classes with single constructor, we don't have to do it anymore in the newer versions of Spring Boot, but I will just do it for the convention's sake and out of the habit. Normally, in web applications, we would have some controller that would call all of these classes using the dependency injection. But since IOC is a concept from Spring, not from Spring Boot, I want to show you this concept outside of the web application. To use this bin in our main method, we need the application context. Fortunately, it's already provided by the Spring Boot Spring application run. So let's create the application context. Application context, right? Context and equals, right? Now we can create our service like this, service example, service, and get the bin from our context. Now we can just call this service, get items, and for each and print the items. If we now run our program, we can see that it will be working, and it printed item 1, 2, and 3. Here is the next video YouTube thinks you will find interesting. Join the Spring Boot Academy, top link in the description. Until next time, create some amazing applications.